Welcome back to another episode of Dear Found Her. I am like blown away by my guest already, and we haven't even really started to talk. But I will tell you this. She has accomplished more in 10 years than most of us accomplish in 10 lifetimes, and she is 25. 25. And I feel like I'm sitting here talking to someone who has 3 decades of experience, and I'm so excited to dive into her story and to share it with all of you. So Alexa Curtis, co-founder of GrasshoppHer, welcome to Dear Found Her.
Lindsay, I'm such a fan of yours. So thank you so much for having me and being willing to share my story.
Oh my God, of course. So tell us your story. Your story is fascinating.
Yes. So I started a blog back in 2011 before the day. I know you and I were just talking about this off the recording, but before the day and age of social media, if you can imagine that, when I was 12. And I started it because I'm from a super small town in Eastern Connecticut called Mansfield, never fit in. And when I was 7, my father was wrongfully convicted and put in prison in Rhode Island. So I spent most of my childhood visiting him there. And then he got out when I was 12. And that's the year that I started the blog. Super normal upbringing. My dad was in sales. My mom's a nurse. And so over the past 10 years, built it out into this lifestyle platform and was really able to kind of exist off of the blog through ads and then through working with a lot of different brands as I started pitching my own TV segments. And through that, had a pretty successful podcast that ultimately landed me a show that I cold pitched to the head of Radio Disney back in 2019. And so I ended up landing my own show on Radio Disney called Fearless Every Day with Alexa Curtis. And I filmed that show for a year and a half. And then while I was at Disney, I had the idea to start this college summit program called the Be Fearless Summit. And so I hosted about 5 of those, ended up leaving Radio Disney and moving to Austin, Texas, where I met my now co-founder, Heather Miller. And so we decided to merge Be Fearless Summit with her existing company, Grasshopper. And so now I just turned 25, and that's really the ultimate goal here, is to build up Grasshopper even more and continue to inspire women.
So we're going to get into what all of these things are. But one of the things that I want to touch upon first is how you started the blog, because I think it is so important to the DNA of you and your business, obviously. And it's also something that so many girls deal with. And me being the mom of 2 young girls, they are 9 and 12. Wow. I have already seen bullying in both of their grades. And I'm sure you're not surprised. And so I would love for you to kind of dial it back a little bit and talk about starting that blog and what having that outlet did for you.
So back in 2011, that's such a good question. Squarespace wasn't even around. I don't even think Wix was around. So I actually started the blog initially on blogger.com. And my sister actually had the idea because she had read about a girl named Tabby Jevinson who started the Style Rookie. Some people might remember her. I mean, she was like an OG teen blogger back when I started. And so I just Googled how to start a blog, and I had the idea life in the fashion lane. And at the time, I mean, I always just did really poorly in school besides English. So writing for me was something that came super naturally. And so I made the blog. I mean, it was free. It was like super, it was just the ugliest website. I mean, and on the side, there was a little box that said subscribers, and it would say the number of subscribers you had, and you could just click subscribe. And so initially it started as fashion, and I would just post photos and like write blog posts on it and stuff. And then back in the day, I mean, the way to really gain a following is you would go to other blogs in that realm and you would comment in the comment box on blogger.com. Like, I love this, follow me and I'll follow you back. And it was kind of ended up, because I was so insecure and someone who didn't have any friends in school, it ended up being this way that I was able to make this community of these girls who were all my age and all these teen bloggers, and you would see it on the side of the subscriber box. So that was really how it started. And then as like WordPress and Wix and Squarespace evolved, I ended up moving it to WordPress and Squarespace, and ultimately made it more of a lifestyle site when I turned about 18. But that was really how I started at the beginning. It was just really a thing I never expected to be anything.
Do you feel like your blog really lifted you up outside of digital, as like in school as well? Like what did it do for your confidence to have that outlet?
Yeah, it was my outlet. You know, some people work out, and now obviously I have so many other outlets that I'm able to overcome anxiety or stress or something with. But at that time, yeah, that was really, it was almost like I would go home from school and lock myself in my room and just write on this blog. And I think also because at that time, there wasn't 18 different streams of places to feel so insecure, right? Like now you can go on TikTok and Instagram. Someone's always hotter than you, skinnier, more successful, more rich, like smarter if you think that they are, even though you've probably never met them in person. At this time, it was like MySpace, AOL, a blog. So it was like, there was no element of even bullying or judgment or jealousy from the internet. And it was kind of this honestly really nice and relaxing time to have a hobby like that.
Did people in school take note? Did they know what you were doing? How was that interaction? It's interesting to think about that, right?
Yeah, so I was pretty badly bullied, and I started getting bullied around the 7th grade, which is when I started the blog. And also, I mean, just keep in mind, like I'm from a super small town, in a town that's not like in LA or New York. People knew what had happened to my father. So on top of that, I'm now like going to New York and taking buses down, able to get myself to Fashion Week and whatnot. And so people did not think it was cool. I was bullied pretty badly. But I think that also the bullying was something that ended up really being able to help me understand and grasp what so many young people go through. And so I, again, like really funneled that into the site. But I would say up until I was 18, maybe even 17, I mean, I was not like going and standing up on stage being like, I'm an entrepreneur, like this is so cool. I mean, I was still so scared of that judgment I experienced in middle and high school.
How did you know how to monetize this blog? You said I was making money. I was making a living. First of all, most kids, boys and girls, do not make a living before they're 18, before they're 21, before they're even 25. Let's be honest. So how, like you said, I was making a living from my blog. How did you know what to do?
That's so interesting. And when I kind of try and explain it to people, and because I get asked that question a lot, and I don't really have any entrepreneurs in my family, so it's quite odd, right? But I think that's a really good segue into this question of like, are entrepreneurs born or made? Because I don't know. I know I had started a LinkedIn profile when I was 16, and I was in a science class at the time, and I had gotten a message from someone who owned a skincare brand in California. And she was like, I bet on your LinkedIn. I would never disclose my age. And up until 16, I mean, I was making like a small amount of money when I was still living at home. I was 16. I didn't need to move out or anything. I was still in school. And she messaged me on LinkedIn and was like, do you do social media for other companies? This is when Hootsuite, I don't know if you're familiar with Hootsuite. Yeah, Hootsuite had like just come out. And I was like, I don't even know, but like, we can try it. So I ended up charging her, I think at the time, like $50 a week. She was completely insane, but I would do like 5 posts a day, and I would try and schedule it in between being in school. And this woman had no idea that I literally like legally could not even sign a contract to get paid. And so because of that, I ended up getting a lot more people who were reaching out to me on LinkedIn. And I ended up getting referred to a woman in New York, Brittany, and she was incredible. And she is an on-air personality. And sometimes I would go down to New York on the weekends or something. It's about like 4 hours from where I was from, bus or train, whatever. And I one day asked her, like, how is it that you're able to go on the Today Show and Good Morning America, and you work with these brands? Like, is the Today Show paying you? And she was like, oh, no, you just pitch the brand, but you can't tell the Today Show you're getting paid. And like something went off in my head as like, I mean, I was probably making like $500 a month on ads for the site. But I was like, this makes a lot of sense. So I ended up going home and pitching the producer at Fox, Connecticut. Just wrote like a cold pitch. It was like 2 paragraphs, somehow landed a segment, went to a bunch of brands. And that's when I figured out really you have to contact the public relations people and the marketing people and pitch it to them. And so I realized after that segment, like I can keep doing this. And so I would just keep upping the rate. So it ended up being between like 17 to 19 before I signed with Disney. I was pretty much pursuing the blog as like my side hustle, my passion, like speaking engagements. And really what was paying my bills was those TV segments. So I was doing like, I would do honestly 2 to 4 a month. And I don't think a lot of people, you would know, but a lot of people don't realize what goes into them. And I would do these model segments because my initial focus at that time was fashion. So I would find JCPenney or Kohl's, $4,000 or $5,000. I was making a ton of money, but the repercussions of it were, I mean, it was immensely stressful. A lot of things I remember being underage with contracts that I didn't realize. And on top of that, you can't a lot of times get paid up front. So it ended up putting me into a lot of debt. And I've spoken a lot about the debt part of being a founder too, because I would get paid, $3,000, $4,000 after 90 days or 30 days from this TV segment. But to get to the segment, to make the money, I'd have to pay the models and fly there. And I'd try and pitch a free hotel. So it was a lot, but really that was how I was able to monetize it for a while.
I just want to say that a couple things. One, things have changed immensely in terms of pay for play TV
Yeah.
segments. You know that. And I'm saying that so that the listeners hear this, because I talk about this a lot actually on social media. I also did a ton of pay to play TV segments back in the day, and I made a ton of money, and my company made a ton of money. And now in today's day, I'm not a huge fan of pay to play, and that's a whole other conversation. I just think it's so different, and it's become very commercialized
So
and inauthentic, But the reason I'm bringing this up is what you just described, and the whole process that you described to getting to the point that you were getting brands to pay you thousands of dollars. That whole process that you just outlined takes adults, like professionals in their 30s and 40s, years to figure out still. You figured it out. Like, you were scrappy and ambitious, and you cracked the code on how you could make money from your blog without being on your blog. And I think that that is a really important thing to point out, because it was a natural extension, of course. And now looking back, you know that, and I know that. But as a 16-year-old, to figure that out,
yeah.
it's amazing. And that is what I challenge founders to think about all the time, is to extend their brand. How do you extend your brand to make more money, not just put all your eggs in one basket? And that was just so smart what you did.
Thanks. And I think it's such a good point to say that is, and especially if you're a founder, right, and you're trying to start a company and you're like, I just need to go viral on TikTok or Instagram, and like, that's it. And I think right now that really is the mentality, but I don't look at it like that. I don't think you can make a sustainable brand that's going to scale and maybe get sold or whatnot based on expecting one viral video, because at the end of the day, the trade shows and like getting in front of people and that face-to-face connection is really, I think, how you build that brand. It's hard to just rely on TikTok to make you a millionaire in a successful company.
Thank you for saying that. And I know we talked about this before we hit record. And, that's a really big issue that I have right now with a lot of young entrepreneurs, that they want success really fast. They don't want to put in the work. They want to be Insta famous or TikTok famous. They want to go viral, and they think that doing that is going to make them a millionaire. And that's not reality. For 99.9% of people, that's not what happens. What would you say to those people? What else would you say to those people? Because I think people need to hear it.
I have two things, and it's something I've thought about a lot. And the number one thing that I've realized is like, look, okay, so you go viral and you make $1 million, you have 10 million and you're 30, right? Are you going to want to put your family on TikTok? Like, what is your point now after this is not sexy anymore? Because ultimately, like, I'm going to be 30, 40, 50. I'm not going to be like young, hot, and blonde anymore. It's going to be harder for me to go through the motions with no repercussions because I don't have a family right now. I don't have anyone to support. So as a business owner, I think the older that you get, the more that that's something that you realize is like, I want to create something where at 40, I don't have to work every day, but I still probably want to. So that would be my first question. And then my second question would be, or thought would be on that. If you are unable to find something that makes you want to wake up every day and help someone, a lot of successful companies were started based on either the founder or the founder's friend or something, trying to fill a need in their life. Like, I started a blog because I had no friends. And I think, you started a company because you were a mom or becoming a mom and expecting mom. And so that was something you were trying to fill. And because of that, in the moments where it is so hard, because it is not the same to be an entrepreneur and a TikTok influencer. I do not think that they're the same thing. It is so hard in those moments where you're so rejected or you're so broke or you just have no idea what you're doing to get back up. And so if you're not willing to get through those moments, but you're just waiting on that one moment where it just hits, you can't do this. Like, do not do this, because it is not fun 99% of the time, until really one day it's fun. But that may take 15, 20, 30 years. So how much are you willing to sacrifice to get to that?
Part of why I ask that is because my demographic tends to skew a little older, like 35 plus for sure, maybe even 40 plus when you break it down. And I have a lot of like 30 to 40-year-olds, and then I have a lot of like 40 to 55-year-olds. That's kind of the range. But I say that because the topic comes up all the time, especially amongst the older end of my demographic. Like, oh, I just am never going to go viral on TikTok. Like, I can't do social media and blah, blah, blah. And I always say to them, that's not going to get you a business.
No.
Like that supports your business and builds your community, but that's not how you have a viable transactional business through social media. So that's why I wanted you to say this, because you are a 25-year-old and you think very much like I do. And I think it's so important for people to hear, not just from me. So thank you.
Yeah. And I think it's great you say that too, because I mean, I can only imagine being 35. And I mean, my co-founder started this at 40, right? So I can imagine, I mean, she has 2 kids. It's a totally different game when you're older than I am. And you're going into this knowing that like you may risk everything, and that puts your family at risk now. But I think the opposite side of not taking the risk is the possibility that it works out is so high if you take the risk. And even if it doesn't work out, if you've taken a risk that's that dramatic, likely something is going to happen to you in your life that's going to make you realize it was worth the risk. So I would say, I mean, you have to go for it, because otherwise I wouldn't want to live with that kind of regret.
You know, what's so crazy, and this is just an aside that I'm sharing, is so like you, I started my company at the same time. I mean, at the same time, it was 2010. And there was no social media. And I didn't really, who knew at the time, but I of course shared pictures of my babies when they were born. That was my business. And now in hindsight, I probably wouldn't do that. If I were starting my business over again, like I wouldn't get into that game. I really had no choice. As we moved into things, people were used to seeing me, they were used to seeing my kids, but I stopped geotagging things. I stopped sharing where my kids went to after school activities. There have been issues where people have taken pictures of mine and shared them. I had an anti-vaxxer take a picture of mine and share it on their profile. I mean, it's really fucking scary. And I definitely didn't realize in 2010, who did, that this was going to be the future. And this is going to be where we were. And to your point, I probably would not have put my kids out there the way that I did.
Yeah. And that's why I think so many people now rely on social media to get them those results, is because it is so different now. The game is so different than how you and I started. I don't know if I could do what I did. I don't think I could. I don't think I could do it now. And I don't know that you would be able to do it now in the same way, because there's so many things you have to think about and so many outside voices. So I mean, it is really just something to think about, is if you definitely are between that 18 to 30-year-old range and you want to go viral for doing something crazy. I mean, would your future kids be proud of this, or your family? I don't know.
Those are such good points, such good points. So I want to switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk about Radio Disney before we move into Grasshopper, because we are going to get to it, I promise. But I really want people to understand all that you've done. I mean, that's a really big deal that you had a show on Radio Disney. You brought up Brittany, who I'm assuming is a mentor of yours. And was she someone who pushed you to pitch this, or did you pitch this on your own?
So I honestly haven't, we follow each other on social media. I haven't spoken to Brittany in like probably 4 years. She just had a kid. I know that. Brittany Levine is her name, and she was incredible. But no, I honestly really didn't have any mentors. Now I do. But so I was doing that like social media thing with clients for probably up until I was 18. I moved out and did the whole starving artist thing in New York when I was 17, went to Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And I was doing it there. I completely stopped doing it probably when I was about 19 and went full force with the TV segments. If I couldn't afford my bills, I would just try and pitch a TV segment. And the reason I got out of the social media thing was I couldn't handle people telling me what to do. And it's their babies, like it's their social media. I get it. Because at that point I didn't know what my career would become. So no, the Radio Disney thing happened. So I was in New York for about a year, and then I ended up moving to Boston, and I had started this podcast called This Is Life Unfiltered, and managed to, by cold pitching, have massive founders on it. I mean, the founder of Headspace, people from Shake Shack. And so it became a very big show in the realm of like that entrepreneurial podcast space. And so I had come across online just from research. I remember I was sitting in Boston. I came across a huge producer list with like every manager agent in Hollywood. And everyone from STX to Disney to MTV was on there. And I sent a cold pitch out, and I BCC'd 466 producers and just basically said, hi, my name's Alexa Curtis. I have a podcast. I've done a lot of TV segments. Like, I have an idea for a show. And I ended up landing 2 different meetings. And one of them replied to me from Radio Disney. and is at the time Phil left now, but Phil Guarini, and it was his assistant who was like, Phil received your email, and if you live in LA, let's take a meeting. And I got the email and was like, oh my God. I had also simultaneously started this thing called Fearless Fridays, where every Friday on social media, I would do something like skydiving or write an email that scared me to do. And so I included that in the pitch. And so I didn't live in LA, but I called a friend of mine from childhood and was like, you always wanted to go to LA. Will you try it with me for 3 months? And within like a week, I subletted my apartment in Boston because I was just getting kind of bored there. And I packed up all my stuff and we found an apartment in West Hollywood. It was like $700 a month. And I had the first meeting with them. And over the course of about like 5 months, ended up, a manager had seen me on a KTLA segment I did, also a pay to play. And was like, we're really interested in this. What else do you have going on? And I was like, actually, I think I kind of cold pitched Radio Disney and they seem interested in the show. Like if this progresses, I really should have someone watch over these contracts. And that was really how it ended up happening. And then the crazy thing is they said yes to the show in November of 2018 or 2019. And then in March, because Disney is so corporate and so slow, I got an email from them being like, as much as we love Alexa, we found some content online. A lot of people don't know the story. We found some content online and unfortunately, like, wish her the best of luck. I was at a conference in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I remember it, you probably have moments
sick.
I literally, even like looking back, I feel so traumatized. I just like fell to the floor and I was like, oh my God. And my manager called me and is like, what the fuck did you do? And I was like, I have no idea. And I'm thinking like, do I have a leaked sex tape? Like I used to live in New York when Tinder came out. Like I have no idea. What they had found was this series of videos I had posted on YouTube called Sex Ed for Teens. That was a very PG format of me trying to educate young women about their bodies in sex ed, because I was never taught about sex ed. Like literally, I barely even said the word.
Oh my God, which is like so needed to be.
Yes, of course. And my manager's like, I don't understand why you didn't delete these. And I'm like, I don't understand why a conglomerate like Disney didn't tell me to delete them before I signed this contract. Anyway, so for 6 months, it was radio silence. My manager's like about to drop me. I'm losing my mind, like depressed out of my mind, can like barely even afford my rent. I'm calling him, she's calling him, leaving a message every day, no response. And then I went to visit my sister in Turkey. She lives in Istanbul. And I really was like, my career's over and I hate my life. And it's just awful. Like I screwed up. This is my fault. And I get a phone call when I landed back in LA from Eileen, who was like, well, your show's back on. Phil said he was too busy to get back to our emails for the past 6 months, but like they'll give you the show still. And that was one of those career moments. And I know this is like such a run-on story, so I'm going to shut up. But that was one of those moments where I was like, oh my God, if I had really given up or just like shut down everything, I would never have known that the show would have come through.
Well, and the trajectory of your career would have changed. It wouldn't be
exactly
what it is.
So then the show went into production in August.
So when did you have the idea of the Be Fearless Summit? Like when did that come to you and how did you start to put that together?
So I had started getting asked to speak at conferences when I detoured the website from fashion to more lifestyle. So I ended up getting some online writing gigs. I would cold pitch the editor of Rolling Stone and Parade magazine ideas that I had, and ended up getting a lot of like good paid freelance writing jobs. And I was getting a lot of responses from like talking more openly about my eating disorder and what happened to my father and being bullied. And so because of that, I was getting asked to speak at some pretty big conferences. Most of them at the time were unpaid. And I would, be on these panels, but everyone was like 30, 40, 50. And I'm like 18, 19. And so I just literally, because I had interviewed so many big founders and because I was on these panels, I was like, I don't feel like I can relate to anyone at these. Like I'm talking to people in the audience who are also 30, 40, 50 about business, and that's great. But what if there's like an 18-year-old guy out there like me who's interested in business and wants to come to these? Like it's going to be hard for him to walk away feeling like he can relate to anyone. So I was like, I literally had the idea of Be Fearless Summit. I made a media kit. I emailed every school for a year while I was at the beginning of Disney, no response. And then I was speaking at the Pennsylvania Conference for Women, and there was a Drexel booth there. And I went up to the girl and was like, hey, like I'm an entrepreneur, I started as a blogger, I have this idea. And I literally point blank was like, no one wants it, but if you ever want like a college summit, like I have a lot of people that I know. She's like, oh, this is so interesting. Like, let's take a meeting. And so I ended up going back to Philly and having a meeting with them. And they were like, we'll give you this space if you want to host an event, but we can't pay you. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. I'm going to call like every famous person I know that I've interviewed. They're all going to show up. That's fine. Well, I had no idea what I got myself into because I mean, it was like back-to-back panels. I ended up getting sponsors. I ended up getting money just from like cold pitching. And honestly made a lot of money from that, but I had never put on an event. I mean, I ended up getting people from Disney to speak and Comcast. I was like coordinating their travel. It was just me. So we did the first one. And then from there, kind of COVID started and I pitched it to UC Berkeley and Vanderbilt. Ended up getting it, same thing. We'll give you the space, but we won't pay you. And the response was just so dramatic afterwards. I mean, this changed my life. I made a mentor. I have a job now. Like, thank you. And I was like, oh God, like, am I on to something? Because I don't really want to plan these events for the rest of my life. And then
can you I mean, obviously people can deduce from the title, Be Fearless, like what it is, but like who came, what went on?
So every single concept was different and it has evolved so much since the beginning, but really the goal was to get a bunch of successful CEOs and entrepreneurs on panels to talk about things that you're not taught about in school. Finances, taxes, how to make a good friend. What if your friends suck? Like moderately into dating, but how to dress for your dream job. But the goal was that 18 to 24-year-old demographic. And so I realized that a lot of people will speak for free. And a lot of people were really starting to believe in the mission of like making people feel fearless. And so I would pitch Shake Shack and I got Headspace. We had a partnership with Fujifilm, all just from cold pitching online. And then sponsors would come and have booths and we would do like a lunch. So students would come and half of them would come for the free lunch and a lot of them would stay and listen to the panels. And then I pitched it to UConn. Actually, the head of UConn saw it on LinkedIn in January of 2020 and sent me a message and was like, how much does this cost? And I stupidly was like, I don't know, $2,000. Like I've never been paid before. And David was like, well, we'll give you $10,000 if you bring this to UConn. And I was like, I remember calling my dad being like, oh my God, it's like someone believes in the idea. And so I did the first big one with UConn. And then from there, we had another one in February. And now it's all just word of mouth. And another one we just did that was another $10,000 deal. That was a 3-hour summit in October.
So Heather Miller is your now co-founder of GrasshoppHer. How did you guys connect and what brought you guys together?
So I moved to Austin and was just planning still to pursue the college summits and never really kind of knew what the next step of it was. Just like I always done, just going through the motions. Like if this doesn't work, I'll end up finding someone else and to do this with and proceed with. And so I did a talk at UT and kept in touch with the woman, Leslie Robinson, who is just a major mentor now of mine. And in February, her and I were on a Zoom and she was like, a woman started a company you need to check out called GrasshoppHer. She's in Austin. She's amazing. And she's also spoken at UT. So I messaged Heather, I think like 3 times on LinkedIn, finally got a response and was like, can I please take you to lunch at Soho House? I want to, talk to you about GrasshoppHer. I started a mentorship company. I did start a mentorship company last year and it didn't really do too well. And so it ended up really just going from there. I ended up sitting down with her for like 2 hours. And during that lunch was like, have you ever thought about having a co-founder? And she was like, it has always really terrified me, but I've always thought about it. Like, what about you? And I was like, I don't know. Something tells me that like, I just don't think we need to do this separately. This will be way better if we do it together. So we ended up just doing, 4 or 5, 6 hour whiteboard sessions every week. We'd come to WeWork and be like, I would bring in the summit experience and the sponsorships. And she was a really big McKinsey consultant. So she has a lot of different business experience than I do. And we ended up officially becoming partners in August and then launching our memberships and more of that reinvented college fair in September. So that's now how we do it.
And so tell us now, what is GrasshoppHer now and what does it look like?
So GrasshoppHer now is a women's upskilling and career-based platform and community. So we have 3 different products that we currently sell, and that is a virtual membership and an Austin membership with a Connecticut chapter launching in 2023, and then the reinvented college fair and career fair. So basically, if you buy into a GrasshoppHer membership, it's very similar to, in a sense, Female Founder Collective or Hey Mama, but our demographic is really that 24 to 37-year-old young adult woman who is progressing through her life and is either looking to land her dream job, pivot, or start a company. Now, the unique selling point of Grasshopper is because of my connections from Disney and Heather's connections in business, we're able to have these major thought leaders on virtual discussions and these in-person events we have in Austin. So we have, for example, like the CEO of Hello Sunshine, Sarah Hardin, Candace Nelson, who's the founder of Sprinkles. We just had Jonathan Javier, who started this massive career company called Consulting. And if you're a member, it's just a Zoom like this. I mean, you're able to literally be on the phone with them. And then there's so many other things throughout the week, like, Slack kind of discussions, and then our events and swag bags. But that really is something that we have found been really exciting for people, because her and I didn't have this when we started our career. So it's really cool to be able to give back to them in that way.
I love everything you describe, because it's like a bump club for new career women, really and truly. I mean, like all the different elements that you just described outside of Slack. We didn't have Slack at Bump Club, but but outside of Slack are really how I built my first company. And I say that because I want people listening to know and understand that a lot of the same principles apply to, every type of business, and it's just applying it to your niche.
Yeah, exactly. And really just figuring out that customer, right? Who is it you're trying to appeal to, and why do you fill that role for them? And I think that's something I would say every founder needs to ask themselves, or aspiring entrepreneur, is for your customer, why you? Like, why are you the best person to sell this product?
So since you and Heather joined forces, what's been the growth trajectory? I know it's recent, but what are the plans kind of moving forward?
So many. So Grasshopper right now is focused on building out these 2 memberships. And so Connecticut, because I'm from there and I've done a lot of summits there, we found a massive following in Connecticut of young women. So we have now brought on someone to basically host this Connecticut chapter. And so we're planning to also start doing more happy hours. So we have this like one event a month, but in Austin predominantly, we're going to start hosting an additional happy hour that's more of like an intro, come mingle, meet. There is certainly an aspect of Grasshopper that we don't want it to just be like any meetup. I mean, these are not events that are just posted online. Like, this truly is a community of powerful intellectual women, whether or not they're CEOs or entrepreneurs, who are really there to uplift each other. So that's really the goal. So we're not necessarily looking to have 1,000 members by December. We really want to make sure that everybody is having this individualized experience. And so that's why we're kind of expanding with the Connecticut chapter first, and then going from there. And then our next plan for 2023 is we're doing an Airstream activation. So a Grasshopper on the road. So you can basically come and get in-person mentorship, starting first with Texas during South by Southwest and on different campuses around Texas. And that's going to be really, I think, cool for us.
Do you ever sleep?
9 hours a night, Lindsay. I'm not kidding. Literally, I sleep. I think sleep is so important, beyond.
You are just like so impressive and such a ball buster. It's amazing to hear you talk about all of these initiatives and strategies and tactics, and just the way that you are, and not even that you want, the way that you are changing the world. It's amazing. Amazing.
Thank you so much. Same to you. I really appreciate it.
So I have just a few more questions for you,
Yeah.
but one of the things that you brought up that I think is very important, and I want to point out because I also talk about this often, and I think the fact that you said this to me twice during the conversation, and you clearly recognize that this is how to do business, is you brought up 2 times, and I know that there were many more than this, but 2 times that were pivotal in your career that you said, "Can I take you to lunch?"
Mm-hmm.
And talk about the impact of that.
The impact of being in front of someone is so strong, and it's something that you don't necessarily get via email. And I think that if you believe so deeply in yourself and in your mission, and I mean, I am not a millionaire yet, like I haven't made it in my mind in any capacity yet, but I am able to sit down and truly either, I think, help someone or inspire them, or really be able to sell them a product. And that's either my personal brand or this company. And either that will make them buy a membership, or it will give me some really good feedback. And I think because of that, knowing that I'm so good at that, and that's why I've done a lot of these college talks, is that element of being in person and being able to really kind of like feel the room, and that energy is how you're able to, I find, scale a successful company. And so I think that taking someone to coffee, and this is not like, I don't just message XYZ on LinkedIn all the time because no one really has time for coffee. Like, why does anyone want to do that? But if you really have something and you think that this person is the person that you need to be in front of, then if they say no to your coffee, then I would literally go and stand outside of their office building. Like, I literally did that when I tried to get a show on Hello Sunshine when I left Disney. I went and stood outside of the office building in Santa Monica. Like, I just think that that is something that is so important. And I think there's so many good ways to go about it too. And especially if this is someone you're looking to get mentored by. I mean, asking someone to go to coffee and share their story, everyone wants to talk about themselves. So do it that way and then know why you're going into it. But just remember, everyone loves something free and everyone loves to talk about themselves.
Such good advice. Such good advice. What would you tell the bullies?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I don't know. And I remember when I was bullied, my sister was like, don't worry, all of these girls will work at Starbucks and you'll be a millionaire. And I was like,
she's right.
I want to work at Starbucks. I don't know. You look back, I think, on these things and I'm like, you're just not like me. But what I wish that a lot of young people knew is that it's just okay to be different. And that usually when someone's different, it means that they're doing something that's going to make people insecure and jealous. And so I hope that they instill that in their future kids and families, is that you can't make someone feel bad just because they're different.
I could cry literally hearing you say this, because all I talk about in our house is why do you want the same shoes as everyone? Yeah. Why do you want the same sweatshirt as everyone? Why can't you just be different? Let's pick out something that works for you and shine through in your differences. And it's very hard. It's very hard when you're raising two girls and they want to have the things that everyone else has and everyone wants the things that they have. My kid might do something different and then they come home from school and they're like, oh, so-and-so got, dyed their hair blue like me. Like my 9-year-old has blue hair right now. That's what she wanted. And I said, okay. So, she wanted to be different. She wanted to be like her sister because her sister did it a few years ago. But in any event, it's so important to hear that. And I appreciate you saying that. And so my last question for you, and I could talk to you all day. I feel like this is going to be a recurring thing because I have more questions for you. But my last question for you today is, what are 3 actionable tips that you would tell a founder right now who's getting started?
Oh man, number 1, limit your scrolling. I think the more that you're comparing yourself to other companies, the more that you're wasting your time not focusing on scaling yours. Number 2, read more. I mean, I've started reading way more than I used to. And I think it's helped me really get out of my head in those moments where I'm just questioning myself and read really intentionally. So I just started reading 3 books and honestly, they've really helped me. And number 3, try something different every week. Like on a personal level, obviously there's such a hustle culture out there. And I've tried to stop being a part of that because I've realized I don't need to work 24-hour days. That's a me thing. Like I used to get up and I wouldn't stop until 8, 9. And I was so tired and I was kind of still so unhappy. And that was something I really struggled with at Disney. And so trying something fun and unique that's personal or even business related just makes you a well-rounded person. And then in reality, a good leader and a good founder.
Alexa Curtis, co-founder of GrasshoppHer. I am blown away by this conversation. You are pure magic. I can't believe you're 25. I can't wait to see what you do. I mean, a millionaire is probably number 10 on the list of what you're going to accomplish. I can't wait to see what is coming next. So thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story with me. I so appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.